'Cause I don't know how much I mean, you were so gracious to say, of course, I'll come on. Like, you don't know
Sure.
who we are. We could be like an MLM. We could be trying to sell you life insurance. You have
You
no
could,
idea.
you could. This could all be Amway. I don't know, but the name of the podcast got me in. So
I know. Well, that's how we get people in. And then, who knows? It's like Fight Club. What happens here?
It's not like
Well, because we talk about everything. Ali Khan was the host of Cheap Eats. I was a network executive at Food Network. Perhaps you've heard of it.
I
TV
have.
has changed quite a bit. And so he and I have come together as dads where we were like, forget this TV thing. Let's talk about the thing that really matters most in our life. And every week we come together, and sometimes it's just us, sometimes we interview people, and we talk about kind of the expansiveness, the experience of being modern dads. And I actually think you're the perfect guest for this because the funny part about being a dad is like you start on day one. For some people, you start before that, right? If you're preparing, a lot of dads don't. Ollie, he was just like, I don't know, I just think it happened.
Look, yeah. Well,
I prepared, but not
my oldest son was born when we were 24. We didn't prepare. Yeah.
Yes, very different experience, and you have 7, I know, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah, we have 7.
But the funny thing is, it's like we have dads on who their kids are in their 30s. We have dads on who have a 3-year-old at home, and I think this is your experience both in life and professionally because
Professionally and personally, yes.
Because you have to understand the experience of a 1-day-old, a baby before they're even here, advising the parents, and then all the way through 18, sometimes beyond. I know I saw on your Instagram you saw a 19-year-old. What's up with that? I thought you stop at 18. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I do a mental health clinic also. I specialize in adolescent mental health and addiction. So I see a lot of those patients through their late 20s.
Wow.
Is there anything this man can't do?
I don't know. I'm like here to listen.
I can't figure out how to get my Sephora bill lower. That's my current biggest issue is that I can't.
This is my kind of doctor. You know what I mean? This is you know what? Clearly, Michael's got some solid bedside manner. That's a good gig. That's a good one.
Now you're making me think that our wives should talk. Is Brearley a Sephora gal? Because my wife she's always telling me, no, I'm in the highest points level of Sephora.
Well, I recently discovered that. Hold on, this is one of my daughter. Hey Maya, you okay? I'm doing a podcast right now. You are now on. Is everything all right? All right, I'll talk to you later. I mean, so I have 3 sons. My sons are all like 30, 29, 26, and my daughters are 23, 20, 18, and almost 16.
Dude.
And the daughters are all still kind of like orbiting around the household. So I recently found out, much to my surprise, that I was a Sephora beauty insider. Did not know that found that out. Just found that out, and I then of course it was time for an intervention. So I brought my current children who live with me together, and I said, "Girls, how is it that I am a beauty insider?" And they said, "Well," I said, "I've never set foot in Sephora." They said, "Yes, but your credit card is there a lot."
Yeah.
So does your wife does not partake in the Sephora? It's purely
it's my daughters are killing me on Sephora. They're the skincare queens. My wife has her own routine. But
yeah. By the way, I just want to say that was the most dad and then also Jewish dad thing.
I missed it.
Because this is is everything okay? That is how my family. That is how I was raised. If the phone is ringing,
it's the daughter that's getting married this summer. She only calls if
everything okay?
Everything okay?
Everybody's fine? Okay. I'll talk to you later.
You don't need anything right now.
Ali Khan, do our listeners a favor because this is like such a special guest.
Yeah.
Like I said, there is so much to cover. I want to lay the groundwork. People need to know who we're talking about. Introduce today's guest.
I know. And you know what? Confession time, Michael. Neil was like, there's a lot to cover here. I need you to take a look at this. I definitely got through the first page of, 5? Jeez, this is huge. Usually Neil can get through maybe 2 pages. But let's get to the intro. Everyone's on pins and needles right now. Today's guest is a pediatric physician with over 20 years of experience caring for children and families. Dr. Michael Milobsky is deeply committed to keeping kids healthy and safe and to providing thoughtful, comprehensive, and truly unparalleled in-office care at his practice, Pediatrics at the Meadows in Castle Rock, Colorado. He's also currently undergoing additional training focused on managing and treating chronic pain and addiction in adolescents, an area of care that's more important than ever. But beyond the white coat and credentials, Dr. Milobsky's most important role is being a dad. He and his wife, Ariella, have 7 children. Together, they enjoy the outdoors, fostering rescue dogs, and living an active, healthy lifestyle. Please welcome.
We also have 4 grandchildren now. That was our.
What the heck, dude? You gotta chill. Yeah, amazing. Even after saying all that, it's not enough. This guy's an
And we didn't even
overachiever.
get into the other parts of his life where he played college basketball.
Go Quakers. That was
Yeah.
it. I played at
So,
Penn.
I mean, there's a lot to dive into, but I mean, like we have to start somewhere.
Sure.
You know, you've been a pediatrician for over 20 years. Why did you decide on peds? I mean, I know that
Yeah.
it's Peds at the Meadows is the name of the
Yeah.
practice, but like
In medical
how
school,
did you figure it out?
it is. I didn't enter medical school with the intention of being a pediatrician. I entered medical school with the intention of being a surgeon of some kind. Second year of med school, I met my now wife. We got married at the end of second year, entering third year. So, and then we had our first child, going to fourth year. And so my exposure to, you're aware, I mean, medical school, at least the old version of medical school, was like 2 years of just like hardcore class. You see in the movies where you dissect the bodies, that's all true. And then the third and fourth years are really around, rotations and clinical rotations throughout the medical system. And you do internal medicine and pediatrics and OBGYN and surgery and psychiatry and all things. And being a husband and then a father, the pediatric rotation just all of a sudden, I guess, really resonated with me. It just had a lot more meaning at the time. And so it just sort of drew me in that direction. And, when we had our son and we were sort of having to make that decision about what residency I was going to do, a 6-year path, all of a sudden, 6 or 7 or 8-year path after med school just didn't seem as appetizing because of that. Then, and pediatrics felt very natural to me. I mean, growing up, the only jobs I ever had were camp counselor. Like that was my profession through high school and college. And so it just felt like a right fit. And then I finished my residency in Baltimore. We were in Baltimore that whole time. And then I moved out to Denver to really focus. I was really focused on pediatric emergency and inpatient critical care. That's what I was doing for 15 years. And then we opened up the practice because we really, it stopped being as interesting, being up all night and the adrenaline just didn't have the same impact on me. And we really wanted to own a business, which was part of it too. We were kind of up to 4 or 5 kids at that point. And so that's when we opened the practice. And then we started, we also have a concierge practice called Chicken Soup, Pediatric Concierge Care. And started really leaning into the mental health and addiction right around 2020 when it seemed to be became a much bigger issue. And now social media seems to be a job that I've taken on as well. It's become a much bigger piece of what I do.
It sure has.
I gotta ask, just the broad strokes. Being a dad is hard. Marriage is hard.
It's humbling.
Being a doctor is hard. Going to medical school is hard. You did all these things at once. Was this a plan? Like, what are you? Who are you?
No.
Besides what I read on the paper.
I think the beautiful thing is that we just sort of didn't have a plan and just kind of fell into all of these things and just figured it out. I know it's hard to, I think most young adults today, I think I don't know what it is, whether it's the way that we interact with technology and we have so much more knowledge, but in 1992 and 93 and 94, you just sort of kind of rolled through things and figured it out as we went along. There wasn't any like global plan. We just sort of made it up as we went. And maybe that's better. Maybe not being hyper focused on, planning out each step and then having anxiety and reevaluating ourselves. And are we doing it right or wrong? Maybe that was a gift.
You were 24 when your first was born?
26.
26.
He's 30 now. He just turned 30 2 days ago.
All right. Well, we can do the math.
Yeah.
Here, Hey, Ollie, finally. So guess who's older than you, you know?
Yeah, right.
Hey, I'm kidding. I
That is
kid. I
This
kid. I
that
well,
is
kid.
this
not
this
true.
might give it away. This used to be Brown.
I'm 8 years younger than Ollie, so but I had kids in my early 30s. Ollie, you were a little bit older, I think, when you had
30.
How old are your kids, just for context?
my great question. Always a pediatrician. My
I
daughter
know.
is about to be 8 on Monday.
Best version of people are 8-year-olds.
Hey, well, I don't know. Sometime.
She's maybe exception.
Oh, Dad. And my son is 5, and Ollie has a 14-year-old.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Yeah, he's 14. It's crazy. So I'm
14-year-old
starting.
boys are a whole topic.
Yeah, no, we were you at breakfast with us about 30 minutes ago? Because yeah, that's. Although I have to say, all things considered, and I will milk the fact that you're a pediatrician right now.
I'm here.
He
I'm here
seems
for
to
you.
be on the side of like late blooming, but the flower is opening. But it's not. I don't know. Maybe he's just his personality has had moments of he's a bit dramatic, kind of like of his old man. So you know what I mean. I've seen certainly like tastes of his rage and his lash out, but I'm okay. I'm still standing. I'm feeling good.
It's
I'm
good.
feeling good. Yeah.
Middle school boys are hilarious. At least I know you live in Texas, so but I don't know any middle school boys anymore that own a pair of pants. They are shorts all year.
Sweats. I mean, it's very comfort wear.
Yeah.
He could go to volleyball practice at any stage of his
But
day
you're
or night.
ready any moment to just hit
Yeah,
volleyball practice.
totally, totally. He looks like an NBA warm up guy. That's his clothing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's certain things that parents used to like make their children do. It wasn't an option. I think one of the skills that maybe we need to bring back is the fact that when I was growing up, I don't want to like be too like crotchety Gen X, in the 70s, blah, 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 80s. But my parents made it clear I often was doing things that I did not find fun or interesting, but were told that this is just what we did. And I just had to accept that. It wasn't like everything wasn't always about my entertainment and my joy. And that came very natural to parents who were baby boomers raising Gen X people. Like when I was 14, once a week, I had to go to this thing called cotillion. I don't know if you guys knew what that was, but I was
I
forced.
mean, I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
Yeah,
I'll
you've
be
heard of it,
honest.
but no one makes their kids do it anymore.
Well, yeah.
It was big in the Jewish community, but
I
I
was
had to
gonna say it
go.
was
Yeah,
waspy, but maybe it's just
both,
you had to be
both.
of a certain kind of, financial
Yeah,
stature. You know what I mean? It's like country
exactly.
club light. I feel like.
Yeah, once a week we had to go with, in our most awkward and uncomfortable version of ourselves and embrace girls and learn ballroom dance steps once a week. And I literally despised it. I would rather have eaten broken glass or slit my wrists. And that was not, it was, you know what? So what? You have to go. This is, not everything is for your enjoyment, but no, they could never explain to me what I was getting out of it. But these are things that I don't think no one has that approach with. I'm not saying that everything needs to be that way, but Dr. Becky, who does this thing called Good Inside, I love
Yes.
her. And I think she's bringing that idea back that your kids should get slowly used to the idea that not everything exists to entertain them and for their enjoyment.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up, and thanks for, when we like Dr. Becky too, and we talk about gentle parenting quite a bit on this podcast, and not necessarily in a positive way, but in a neutral way, right? And I think like that's the philosophy that we have tried to adopt, but also wonder sometimes like, is this the right way? Because I think there is this generational slide, like I'm a millennial raised by a boomer who was raised by the greatest generation, who was raised by, the depressive, emigrated. So like everything is, well, you should have seen how it was when we were kids, and I find myself as a 40-year-old man with an 8 and 5-year-old slowly becoming that and trying not to be. I don't know if you've ever seen those progressive commercials where they're like, we can't help you from becoming your parents.
Yeah, I love that. I love that one. That's my
I,
favorite.
my favorite series of commercials. My dad says that when he was growing up, my grandfather, who fought in World War II, was raised in an orphanage. It was like children are to be seen and not heard. And then by contrast, my parents raised us like you were saying, like we didn't do activities every day. Maybe we had one a week, if we were so lucky. Mostly my childhood was like going to department stores and hair appointments with my mother or the hardware store with my dad, and I was lucky to be there. And I remember my parents were chronically late. And I remember saying, like, to my dad once, well, like, I waited for an hour. And he's like, I used to wait all day for my parents.
Every complaint you had a rebuttal that was
I'll tell you,
a 10x rebuttal.
my kids' pickup time is, I should know this, it's either 2:20 or 2:25. And because I have a kindergartner and a second grader, they're on different sides of the school. And if my wife's not available to do pickup and I have to do it, then I'm like, all right, who's going to get out first? And when I tell you, like, when this school year started, my wife called me in a panic, like, where the fuck are you? Cece's is in the office, like, thought that I was, like, at a bar somewhere on Coney Island. And I looked down and it's like 2:29, and I'm like, Zeke.
Oh yeah, I remember in 1979, my mother forgot to pick me up from soccer practice, and I had to sit around in the dark for 2 hours because
That
my
was a
mother
Simpsons
forgot.
episode. That's
And so,
amazing.
and so this teacher, I guess, if the parents are not there at dismissal time, she
Yeah,
waits
yeah.
like 4 minutes and then takes them right into the office. And so I get
Calls
this
the police.
call. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I'll be there in a second. Like, what? And then my daughter was like, you were late. And I'm like, I wasn't late. And then I found myself becoming my dad and just being like, please, I
Let me
was
tell you about
5 minutes late. So yeah, the
late.
generational slide is real. What
It's
do we
real.
do? Because I don't want to be I don't want to be a pushover. But I also don't want to, I know you have this
So
whole 80/20 thing.
I do.
80% of your experiences with your kids should be positive. 20% can be, I don't know, combative, but like what do
Well,
you think?
20% is
Friction.
where you're setting a boundary, like, all right, this is not a negotiable, and your response is okay, but I'm not. It's not going to change the outcome, kind of picture where you kind of have to hold the line. And I think I see a lot of younger parents, not younger like you guys, but I see a lot of parents currently in their is kind of getting into this constant negotiation and dialogue and chasing their kids, after, no, no, no. And their whole day feels to them is just this constant negative energy correcting their children. And no one feels good about that. And I'm not a big fan of like parenting styles and parenting hacks because as my experience has been that each child needs something different from me. And it's my job as a parent. And I am the first one to tell people I started being a parent at 26. I was not good at this. I was not a conscious parent. I was also going through med school and residency. This is stuff that I've learned much later, and my younger children have definitely benefited. And I apologize to my older children all the time. But every kid is their own individual puzzle to solve, and not every kid needs the exact same thing from you. So this whole idea that I'm going to have a parenting hack, a parenting style, and I'm just going to apply that across the board and it's going to work the same on everybody, I think is a fallacy. I think you have to have paradigms, but at least to know that each kid is teaching you something different about yourself, and each kid needs something unique from you, and you can't always approach each kid the exact same way. I see that in my own home. I'll give you an example. I have one child, her birthday is sacrosanct. If you don't turn it into a 3-day festival of recognition, she is destroyed. And I have another child who could care less and just doesn't need that. And my kids have learned that not every kid needs and gets the exact same thing the exact same way. We have to read each child and respond to that.
I'm
See,
really
Neil,
curious about that because, Ollie has one, I have two. I'll you're an only child, right?
yes,
And
yes.
he's
You're
one, and
doing okay, Ollie. I mean, not too much
yeah,
therapy. I mean, you're doing fine.
I know. I've
he's
never been to a therapist. I should. I should. I can start with this and you.
This will be a really good place to start.
yeah. I was one of three, and it's interesting because I find it in my family of origin. I have two younger sisters, and then I'm watching this kind of dynamic develop between my son and my daughter. Mostly they love each other, they're best friends, but they can really get on each other's nerves. And I also, especially, I find that my older daughter, if we give attention or something to our son, she said, well, that's not fair. Why does he get that? And when we try to use logic, well, hey, life isn't fair, but like, hey, you were out at a friend's house when we did this special thing, or, you already ate, birthday cake, and so your brother can have candy. You're not the same. How do you deal with that? Does it ever end? You have these adult sons and these younger daughters. I mean, what do you do with that emotional piece about like if resentment or this feeling, this quest for justice that is like you do your best, but like not everybody gets the same. They won't.
No,
It's impossible.
no, and listen, I think that you have to you do it by showing up and to the best of your ability, giving each child the individual attention and time and investment. And then that it's normal and natural that when they're younger, that just is much bigger. But as time goes on, they feel your presence, they feel your consistency and your without having to explain it to them. Like this is not something that you have to like lecture, sit down and lecture them on, but just your being present, showing up every day and through that, it's just absorbed. So much of what your kids absorb is by what you do and not what you say. It's how you live your experience in front of them and being able to apologize when you're wrong. That was not something I was raised with. I'm sure your parents weren't like, "Hey Neil, really sorry, Ollie boy, I really didn't show up the way that I should have, and I really want to do better next time." That was not something I was raised with, but I had to learn. And talk about something powerful when your kids experience your process and your commitment to growth and being the best version of yourself and showing up in front of them. It really just comes out in the wash.
You brought up something that I think is like, I feel like it's something we probably, for the most part, we all do, certainly when we talk to the world's greatest dads. But do you feel like, mentally you have this checklist where you're raising your kids, you're interacting with them, and you're really navigating those tough waters where you go, wow, I remember how this played out 20 years ago, and we're not doing that. Do you ever find yourself doing that? I feel like I'm rehearsing those scenes with really my dad, 'cause my mom had mental health issues, so she wasn't really parenting me. But I just think about like, yeah, this is what he did, and I ain't gonna do that. Does that happen to you?
All the time, all the time. I'm always kind of replaying that movie in my head of all these interactions and then trying to be different. And I think sometimes when I reflect back on my first, my youngest kids, and I was just struggling with my own exhaustion and just trying to get through the day. And then having we had 3 boys in 4 years. That was kind of how we started. And that doesn't always serve us because you end up just, instead of being present and intentional about what your child is trying to communicate to you, you're so in your movie of your past and just trying to do what's not that you're not really responding to your kid either. And so, but it's helpful, it's useful. And, I spent a lot of time reflecting on interactions I didn't show up for well and didn't do a good job with. And then using the movie in my head about, okay, now I know what not to do, but how do I want to address this thing differently the next time and show up differently? It's valuable, but it doesn't always serve us to just be, reacting to our own negative experiences with our parents and doing the opposite, because that may not be necessarily what your kid needs either.
So what the spread is, I think you said your oldest is 30.
My oldest is 30 and my 7th child is turning 16 very soon.
What's their relationship like? The 30-year-old and the 16-year-old, and the dynamics between all
it's
the
interesting because my 30-year-old was never in the home with the 16-year-old. My older kids go to yeshiva, so they left the house, when they were like 14, 15. Not always, didn't work out great for all of them. I have to say that was a lesson that we learned. Like we have to understand that better. Like definitely was not perfect for all of them. So, but she is the best aunt for the grandchildren. They love her more. Like they adore her because they have a relationship that's more like a parent, kind of a quasi parent child, but they were never living together. So they've had to kind of renegotiate the relationship all the time. And they come back, and my oldest son and his family come back a couple times a year. This child is growing up super fast, and they have to kind of renegotiate all of those parameters over and over and over because they were just so distant from each other.
Can we jump into yeshiva? Because, sorry, as a non-Jew here,
Yeah.
look, it's like, I think I know what it is,
Hogwarts
but I
for
kinda
Jews.
don't.
That's the best
I thought
way
it
to
was college. I thought yeshiva was a college.
No.
Is there-
So in our world, for high school, the boys and girls never go to school together, starting at like 2nd grade. They're just not in school at all together, which I think has its pros definitely and can be some cons. But for us, it was always more pros than cons. And At high school, the boys all go to yeshiva for high school. And then after high school, they go to yeshiva in Israel for some time and then come back and figure out what they want to do. My oldest son happened to be college and med school. My middle son got a real estate and insurance license and works, does that. My third son went to college but finished remotely because he moved to Miami and opened up a real estate company. So just, very different paths after yeshiva. But yeshiva is kind of like Hogwarts for Jews, meaning you send your kid away and all the teachers have long white beards and they speak different, sometimes it's English, but it's this whole other language that's a mixture of like Yiddish, Hebrew, and English that they just talk in yeshiva. They have big leather-bound spell books that they sit around and read, and you can't really look at, no one can read them except them. And it's very Hogwartsian, kind of like if Hogwarts were for Jews, that's what yeshiva is.
See, you can say that. If I said that, Neil would turn this into one of his is this anti-Semitic or TikTok that he does? He would throw me under the bus in a heartbeat, Mike.
100%. That's that's our dynamic. Are you a Seinfeld fan? Did you grow up watching?
And there are certain episodes, Neil, that I rewatch over and over and over. I cannot get enough of George's speech about the sea was angry that day. I can watch that. I'm
happy to hear this, Dr. Milobsky, because you're modern Orthodox? What do you consider yourself?
I mean, we definitely started out more black. We're a Baal Tshuva. I wasn't raised in this. I mean, my parents are Jewish, but I was raised in a very kind of typical secular, Hebrew school a couple times a week and public school, and the push to go to, college and be a doctor because that's the only way to be successful.
Okay.
And my wife also
fell into it. You fell into becoming more religious over time.
It was when my wife and I got married, we decided that we wanted a home more like this. And we have gone through our own evolutions. I'd say that if you looked at the way we live now, it definitely looks way more kind of what we'd call modern Orthodox. There were phases where we were really identified more with kind of the black hat, yeshivish kind of thing that you see a lot around Brooklyn, right? But a lot of that has evolved as we have evolved, and like we've just changed our views on things.
I'm so fascinated by all of it because I'm married to a woman who grew up modern Orthodox in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up, I guess you call it secular. We went to a conservative synagogue, but definitely, we did not observe to the heights that the congregation did. I consider myself a Seinfeld Jew. I consider myself a Katz's Deli Jew, a Woody Allen Jew. Not that kind of Woody Allen Jew, but the film. No. Not his personal life. But I'm so, fascinated by this because your professional life is very secular and life at home is, more oriented around family and values that have existed for thousands of years. And obviously, you mentioned yeshiva in Israel, and like, how do you, especially in 2026 and especially in just like America today and the world, like navigate those two very different but intersecting worlds? I'm sure you have a lot to say about that, but I mean, it's become a bit of a lightning rod. Again, like I'm a secular Jew who grew up in New Jersey, who now lives in a pretty, gentrified neighborhood, and it has been omnipresent, a part of our conversation for the last 3 years, 2.5 years. I think you know what I'm referring to. So how do you navigate all that? Because your goal is just, your kid's sick, let me treat him. Your kid is having a problem, let me help him. But this is the reality in the world we live in. So I'm curious your thoughts on all that.
So, I practice I live in a Orthodox neighborhood, but it's not like an Orthodox neighborhood like Brooklyn. Like, most of my neighbors aren't Jewish. It's just, we're centered here, and there's like 3 neighborhoods in Denver. And my practice is in a completely, area there's a lot of religious affiliation, but it's very evangelical Christian, Mormon, that kind of thing. And I wear a yarmulke to work every day. I don't hide it. I don't at all. And I've been practicing in that area for almost the entire time I've been in Denver, either part-time 1 day a week, but the last 15 years fully as an owner of a practice there. And my patients overwhelmingly appreciate that I don't hide from that spiritual side of my life. I talk about it with my patients. None of the kids in Castle Rock, Colorado, know what a yarmulke is. They're completely baffled by it because there's just no Jewish kids there. Or there are a few, but there's no, Orthodox or, affiliated kids there. And I'm very open about it. And people ask me about it and I talk about it. I think there's a lot of the values that I have absorbed coming to being a religious Jew for my adult life, I deploy and think there's value when I talk to families. I don't identify them as a Torah value or a Jewish value, but some of them, I'll give you I think the most prominent example is that there's a very prominent Talmudic idea of raising children called planting and building. That planting is how you behave and act and model values that you want your children to absorb. That's like putting seeds in the soil. It's not by lecturing them or telling them, but if you want your kids to see kindness and generosity and integrity, you live that in front of them and show them what that looks like. That's planting. Building are the 80-20 rule. It's the structure and organization that children need their parents to provide to create the right field and environment for them to graze in, to use the shepherd analogy. And, bedtimes are healthy. You know what the healthy bedtime is. Your child doesn't know that. You have to show them. You build that for them. Eating together and healthy meals. And those are things you have to show them and build for them so the seed can grow and meet its potential. That's a completely Jewish and Talmudic idea. I talk about this all the time with families when they're struggling or when they come to me for guidance on this, but I don't identify it as such, but it always, people relate to it. So it is integral to what I talk about, who I am and how I try to help families.
I mean, yeah, I think that's amazing. And I think it's, I think the reality is that many of our values in society are not new, right? And I think, and also aren't just unique to one religion, right? I mean, there is so much overlap between, Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism, and I think there's even like humanist, atheists who probably like, what does it always come down to, right? Like kindness, empathy, learning, growth, resilience. Like I think
humility, I mean, all those things.
yeah, and I think like being able to so I think that's really beautifully said. How do you navigate if there are challenges? I know that, obviously stuff comes up topically in the world. Do patients ever bring it up, or is it kind of like a no-fly zone? You're just like, hey, we're just here to kind of treat.
No, I mean, my patients bring it up all the time because there's so much, because of the type of community that it happens to be, there's this overwhelming interest and support for who I am religiously and my connection to Judaism and Israel and Jewish people. If there are people who have other views, they just simply don't tell me. But every single day, I get spontaneous outpourings of support and gratitude about that from the patients and the families that I serve all the time, because it's that kind of communities.
Yeah.
I never put it off. I never run away from it. I always embrace it, and I always willing to talk about it and talk about my experience. I mean, a lot of the patients that come to me because they find value in who I am and my experience to be able to share with them.
Yeah. Well, and Ali, I'm sure you know this word. I mean, you grew up around doctors and lived in LA for a bit. Like the word mensch, you give mensch, and I think people can just tell there's a warmth about you. But I am curious because, so much of your professional life and practice is face to face, tactile. I think part of maybe the toxicity certainly comes from social media. And I want to use that as a segue to talk about teens, preteens, your kind of like thoughts on managing screen time and the realities of, look, I think I'm not a Luddite. I think technology is amazing. And I think like technology is, this whole kind of like doom and gloom and catastrophizing about AI, like AI is going to detect cancers way earlier. Like, let's be real. But it needs to be regulated, right? And so I'm curious, like, the same thing for social media. Like, what are your thoughts? What's the advice you give to parents who are like, oh, yeah, we got our kid a phone? Like, how do you do that in a smart way, in a healthy way?
So I think that we are fortunate in our current time to have one of the greatest voices on this be so out in front. And Jonathan Haidt's book of The Anxious Generation is a clarion call and a model for how every parent who is raising kids now in 2026 should be approaching and thinking about this issue. I can't say it any better than that. The man has taken all of the things in, and I parented kids in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, now 2020s, and we kind of we had no information. We didn't know, and so we just kind of did what everyone else was doing or followed the crowd, and now we don't have that excuse anymore. We know how this stuff impacts our children's minds, childhood in general, and then mental health. It is not a mystery, and it is clear. And Haidt's book, it's the first thing I recommend everybody pick up if they have especially younger kids, because you now have the opportunity to be intentional and to have a plan, which we never had for most of our kids until very recently, the much younger kids, and protect your kids' mental health in a way it's a lever every parent can pull. And finding communities of parents together who are all on the same page, so you're not kind of swimming upstream against, a bunch of households like in your school community who are all doing one thing and you want to do another. You have to act communally. And I don't know about New York or Texas, but Colorado, more and more of the schools are going phone free, finally, middle schools and high schools, which needs to be done. So that should be a Bible on that entire topic, that children do way better when this access to all of this is delayed as long as possible. And if nothing else, at least until high school. And then how it's deployed after that should be very, very cautious and intentional. And there should be spaces in their lives that don't have it at all.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on exactly the book a little bit? And also I'll have some specific questions about where to navigate with my 14-year-old, because he did just get a phone. But we'll get into the nitty-gritty there. But if you can just kind of break down exactly what the book's about.
So Jonathan Haidt makes the very rational case that I don't think is refutable anymore, that childhood has fundamentally changed. And it's just the reality. We shouldn't be genuflecting about it. It is just clear that childhood and the childhood experience has now been completely entwined with our relationship with technology, for the good or for the bad. And there have been, because that time of life is a critical developmental time for our minds, emotionally and academically in all these areas, that it has really significant negative consequences if it's not thoughtfully carried out. And we are seeing it because the mental health crisis in this country, which people have kind of stopped talking about because all this other stuff is more interesting, but it is still ongoing. And you can absolutely trace where all of that started lockstep with the movement of phones and social media into children's lives at an earlier age. And so what he's saying is that childhood, in terms of maintaining and protecting our children's mental health and development of certain skills, which are also being lost. This being bored is a skill. Imagination is a skill. All these things that directly correlate with emotional regulation and cognitive performance, social emotional development, all that is, we are doing our kids a favor if we as parents can act together to say, all of us and more of us are going to delay the accessibility of this tool, it is a tool, it can be a tool, until much later in their lives. And when they do get it, it should be with guardrails. It shouldn't just be free, unfettered access as much as possible. And that certain spaces, especially school, is a much healthier place for our children's minds and emotions and social development if they are more phone free. That is the basic summary of his book. And he talks about he has tons of research and tons of information to back up what he says. And he gives actionable ways for parents to act together, and everyone should be reading it, I think.
So now I'm just going to completely monopolize this time and turn it into just really what I need to get through.
All right, I'll need time.
We just got, we didn't just, my kid got a freaking iPhone maybe 3-4 months ago. And
that's what they are. They're not just iPhones, they're freaking.
Yeah, of course. You know what I mean? We gave it, and whatever. He's in eighth grade. He's one of the latter people to do it. His school does have the band, thank God. But uh, he doesn't have social media, and we're really limiting. He doesn't have like TikTok, Snapchat, da da da, and we're really watching him. And they do have all the Neil. You know about this, right? You can set. God, he's always like, "Can I have more screen time? Can I have more screen
Oh
time?"
yeah,
You're
you
like,
can set
"5
it.
more
You can
minutes."
set when it shuts off
You're
and when.
with an 8 and 5-year-old, it's manual. We're like, click or give me my phone back, or your
Yeah,
tablet is
it's
gone.
analog. It's analog with an 8 and 5-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at now. But I feel like, and this is going to be great for us, Neil, when we crush some clips. Dr. Milobsky, I should cave and give my phone at age.
Well, if you follow Jonathan Haidt's advice, you should try, if it's possible, to have zero kind of smartphone involvement until at least 16, if you can. And then if whatever reason, and we all have our reasons why your kids end up with it before, do it with guardrails, meaning they don't need Instagram, just is kind of like a torture chamber for mental health if you're too young to understand that most of this is fake and should not be something that you take to heart. So they should just not have access to that. It should be a great way to text, should be a great way to watch funny videos, but it shouldn't be unfettered access to everything on the social media landscape and the internet landscape. It should be monitored, filtered, and it should have limits, especially, like you said, like phone-free periods. In our lives, I have to say, one of the most valuable things about how we live, but we were doing it way before our kids had smartphones, but now that we live in that age, I see the value in it even more, as we have 24 hours where none of us are on it. From sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. And my kids are just used to it. And they're just used to, especially in the summer when that is a long day, when sundown Saturday in June and July is after 9 p.m. And they're just bored, and they're good at being bored, and they figure out how to function around that. And, pull out the board games, pull out the card games, go for a walk, talk to each other endlessly. The meals go on for hours just sitting at the table together. In most homes, that doesn't happen that often. And so, having designated time where everybody doesn't have it, you don't have to call it Shabbat, call it whatever you want.
I was going to say, isn't this like, was it Saturday for Orthodox Jews? You see them walking around? No
Yeah,
car?
but members, in our world, days start at night. So the day starts sundown Friday.
Have you never been to a Shabbat?
No, but I live near Larchmont in LA. You know what I mean? I mean, I was like, what's going on? A bunch of Amish people. You know what I mean? I figured it out.
Well, only for
I figured it out.
24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, but Ali, have you never had challah?
Yes. Oh, okay.
Come on.
You don't want to get down with my kreplach. Listen, I can order. You know what I mean? And we can get into the delicatessen.
What's your Jewish deli of choice, Ali?
Man, it's sadly, well, I'm not
LA. We'll go LA because I imagine
clearly. Yeah. Now, it's funny. I never, I went and did the pastrami at Katz, but the foodie answer is always like Langer's, but I don't know. There's something about like, Canter's. I feel like you want to be kind of closer to like the historic neighborhood a little bit, but Canter's, I don't know. There's just something about that spot. 24 hours, like it has that linoleum and the lights. It's been a minute.
It's gritty.
Yeah, I don't know. There's and like it's far from like perfect. It's not. You're not there for the food, but like I don't know. I feel like there's history in that neighborhood, which adds some texture to it. And then I could tell you too, like one of my best friends from college, grew up in West LA, Jewish kid, like in the neighborhood, and we would just go trip down. I mean, we went to places that only Jews from West LA went to. They weren't the best delis, but they were like, you got to be down. You know what I mean? Labels, tables. You know what I mean?
Jewish deli where you are now, Ali?
What's that? You know what?
Do you have a deli where you are now?
So, ironically, the place that I would go to has the best matzo ball soup I've ever had. And I took a group of folks there, and the best compliment I ever got was, she had said, when I talked up this matzo ball soup, she goes, well, I make my own matzo ball soup and it's my mother's recipe or whatever. At the end of it was a food tour. At the end, she goes, I'm going to come here for high holidays and buy this soup. I mean, it is,
Shout
but
them
it's
out. Why
also
are you not shouting them out? What's the point?
Mum's Deli, Mum's. He's well, it's really interesting too because he's a guy who's like he's born and raised in Texas. His grandparents are from Queens, and and he's
That
Jewish.
explains it.
Yeah, and he just kind of decided to marry two things, which is the art of brisket, but he corns it like corned beef and then adds the peppercorn crust like pastrami. So he makes brisket out of pastrami. And he makes a, this is the thing. It's more food forward. But the matzo ball soup, I just haven't had any kreplach in a long time. And the best part is when I meet people and they're like, I'm Jewish. I've never heard of that. And I was like, well, you got to, you know what I mean? You got a little bit more homework to do.
I
But
want to go
yeah,
back to I want to go back to smartphones quick because I feel like there's more to be said. So Ollie's kid, he's 14, he's got an iPhone. My kids know my code on my phone, which probably is not a good thing because
Less than ideal, right?
I'm like, hey, by the way, it's my ATM code. So if anyone just wants to like hack my entire life, they can do a
This
lot
is
of
also my
damage.
birthday.
Yeah,
Neil, that's terrible. Come on.
I know. And I was assigned an ATM code when I was like 17 and I just, it's burnt, it was random. Anyways, so my daughter, well, actually both of them now, they'll do Duolingo, because my daughter's in the French program, so she'll do Duolingo on my phone. My son is learning to read, so he'll do English Duolingo, like, which is hilarious, probably for like people learning to speak the language, but for a 5-year-old, it's somewhat valuable. And it's like a way for me to get something done and them to be doing something productive and or they used to go on the PBS Kids app occasionally because everything's on social media. We'll let them look at like cake videos or their camp has an Instagram, so they'll go look at
Yeah,
like
yeah, of
old
course.
camp videos or whatever. But I do find that there is certainly a friction to it, and when you take it away, it creates kind of a chaos. But I think what something, and Ollie knows this, just for Hanukkah, my daughter got this thing called a tin can, which I don't know if you've heard of this. It's this unique, because I struggle with the all or nothing. Like you're either have, an iPad or you're like, it's
Or you're
Shabbat.
living in 1986, right?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be one or the other?
Not even 86, like the 30s, like nothing. There is no way to communicate. And I understand the powerlessness of that. And so there's this thing it's called a tin can, and it looks like a landline and it works on Wi-Fi. And my daughter has like 5 or 6 kids that are approved. My wife and I have an app, and anyone else who has a tin can, they can call up with the hours that you allow, and she'll call her friends and say, hey, what'd you have for dinner? But we have the entire call history. We can take it offline. And the parent on their end has to approve. And so usually it'll be like we'll text the other parents, "Hey, I heard so and so got a tin can. Can you approve us?" And then they're allowed to communicate with each other, right? You also can call out. So my daughter has my wife's phone and my phone in there, so you can call out to an outside line if it's approved. But so it's not like it's even in some ways safer than the old landline because you couldn't just get a random call from the phone book. But I'm curious, like, that to me feels like a balanced way to give your kids some autonomy, but also have like, eyes on it. But what do you think about this whole like Instagram teen accounts? Because I know they're pushing it really hard. Now, the cynic in me goes, well, yeah, like they're, how do you get more market share? You go, oh, look, it's like, it's just like the ratings. It's just like seeing a PG-13 movie. I feel like that's a false equivalence. Like a 90-minute story that has been vetted, by a studio and that you kind of understand what the content is different than like anybody can upload anything, but it's kind of for teens. Like, and I know that they had all these influencers push it out, like, my kids are on Instagram teens accounts. And I'm like, yeah, I know Mark Zuckerberg just paid you like 15 grand to say that. But as a doctor, what are your thoughts on Instagram teen accounts?
Yeah, I think it's bullshit. To be perfectly honest, I think the whole thing about social media is that decreasing kids' entwinement and isolation with this virtual digital world that absorbs them. That's the whole point, and that we're giving childhood back to the kids. I love the ability to communicate and call your friends just like we all used to do. It's bringing that back, like you said, and even in a more monitored and safe way. But the issue with the phone isn't the phone function. The issue with the phone is this entwinement and absorption alone in this digital world, which we have seen is toxic to the development during these critical windows of emotional growth and development. Period. That's it. It's not about, if it was just a paperweight that you could call your friends with, that's fine. It's not that. And I think the whole Instagram teen thing is moronic. It's just that same thing. What you're trying to avoid is just all of that, until your child is developmentally old enough to see it for what it is and can themselves approach it in a healthy way. And 11, a 12, a 13, a 14-year-old needs help. They need guidance from us to understand it. And
tell you when I'd be convinced is, Mark Zuckerberg has 3 kids, I think. If his kids are on it,
yeah, good luck. I'm sure they're nowhere near it.
Then I'll bite, but
My wife's a pediatrician.
I have a feeling they're not going on Instagram.
Snap. There you go. Maybe we can get her to give up her practice for being married to a fraud. So, okay, I'm kind of curious about this, and this is going to be a great segue. We want to jump into mental health, warning signs. I have a 14-year-old, so, we're starting to get into all the feelings and whatnot. But I'm also kind of curious, too, just because I think this social media thing is quite linked here. Wanted to get your thoughts there, but also just quickly, since we're talking about social media, like as a pediatrician and someone who works in the mental health space as well, do you notice like some teens are more taken by certain social media platforms more than others? And just as a quick example for this, like, I'm kind of, use the Instagram, use the Facebook, literally as part of my business, right? I tried the Snapchat thing. I never really got it. What was interesting is when my kid got the phone and he was like, okay, what apps can I get? And he asked for Snapchat. And I'm literally, as the old man that I am, I'm like, why do you want that? Does anyone use that? So I'm kind of curious what you're getting from talking to the youngs, what they seem to be using.
So, and this is also, I think, supported in Haidt's book. So definitely different realms of social media impact different kids in unique ways. There is a significant amount of evidence now that girls seem to be especially vulnerable to the negative impacts of Instagram, for instance, because certain things about Instagram hit emotionally the unique things about girls that is different than boys, that they are much more into comparisons and take that more to heart and much more sensitive to that. Boys just, don't necessarily, that doesn't have as huge an impact on their emotional lives as it does on the emotional lives of girls. Boys get much more sucked into video game life because that hits much more their type of brain. Boys and girls' brains are fundamentally different. Now, listen, there's obviously, people will say there's individual exceptions about their kid, but on average, from a treetop view, boys and girls' brains have different developmental paths starting very early. I see it as young as a year to year and a half. Boys and girls start to diverge quite significantly in development, ways they develop. And so Instagram really seems to be significantly worse for girls. Boys tend to be way less invested in Instagram. They don't seem to care about it as much. They're way more invested in the video game world, which is a massive dopamine producing instrument in their lives. And there is a significant addiction issue with that, with video games. And there's a significant desensitization, especially to intense violence and aggression. I think different things hit differently depending on what you're talking about.
The video game thing. Oh my God. It's crazy. It's hard. I'm not going to lie. Like he is, the weird thing is, am I concerned that he logs in lots of hours? He loves video games.
Yeah, they all do. It's crack. Yeah, no, they all do. Ollie, it's normal. So once again, knowing that they're not going anywhere, okay, that video games are not going anywhere. They're just going to get closer and closer to us. Instead of a console, it may be something that's even more virtual. I can't even imagine what AI is going to turn video gaming into for my grandchildren. I don't know. It's hard to even imagine. I couldn't imagine when I got my kids a Nintendo Cube, which was the first video game we had in our home, right? I could not imagine what it looks like now. I mean, not even close. It's having an approach that you have to have. It can't just be make it up as you go along. You have to have intentionality, knowing what the pitfalls can be, and being and not doing it in the moment. Like, it's got to be what you can't decide to create an approach and a boundary at the time you're telling your kid to shut it off and now we're doing it this way. It has to be away from that. You have to involve them in it. You have to give them a hand in the process, because then everybody feels invested and everyone has ownership. So, this is where our parents' parenting didn't really work. The idea of relinquishing control to anything to your kids was completely foreign to them. It creates a certain sort of collaborative and investment when they're helping create, hey, here's how we're all going to abide by this. So they're here to stay, but we have to have an approach. You can't just let it be whatever in the moment. That's the key.
Yeah, I am. One thing I will say with the old big tech, I am glad for the whole screen time limits. Like
Yeah,
that,
thank
that,
God,
that,
right?
that has flowed directly into it, and that does help me.
You can always just shut off the Wi-Fi too if you really get fed up.
Believe
But
me, dude, there are times where I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? Like straight out of Mission Impossible, like the real proper villain, like I shall
yeah,
deactivate your
shut off
device.
the Wi-Fi.
Then you
It
won't
could
have
happen.
it.
What's
What's
that?
that?
But then you don't get to have it, Ollie.
And that's the problem, isn't it? But at least
No, it's fine.
I've had experienced adult life without it, so I at least have something to access if the Wi-Fi goes
I
out.
can also drive a car, guys. I mean, Jesus, I have other
Point
interests.
taken.
You can also
I'll
drive
go
to
to the bar.
Starbucks.
I know. Touche.
So I wanna
Touche.
I wanna pivot and we're gonna wrap up soon. And Ben, we're gonna do our damnedest to have you back because
Oh yeah,
there's
let's
we
do a
didn't
part
get
two.
to. But I want to pivot to something that's pretty important and you know it really affects kids from every age. But I think the way you talk to them about it changes, and that is, you know, consent and bodies and bodily autonomy. I mean, again, like this is one of those things that is kind of like hard to talk about for parents, maybe because of our own baggage, because of society. I can tell you when I went to the pediatrician as a teenager, he was like, examining me, and he was like, you drink drugs? I was like, no, no. And he was like, sex. And he goes, before I could answer, he goes, anybody can read a box. And I was like, and I remember feeling so offended. I was like, that's what you're gonna say, like, oh, wear a condom, like that, like it's so throwaway and thoughtless to a teenage
Check,
boy.
right?
And for context, he knew the girl I was dating at the time, and I think he felt a little uncomfortable. I probably should have seen a different doctor, but that's my parents.
Got
Anyways,
it.
however, that aside, speaking of generational change, we tell our kids, your body is yours. You don't have to hug anyone you don't want to. You don't have to kiss anyone you don't want to. Whereas when we were growing up, it was go give Aunt so-and-so a kiss, go give Grandma a kiss, go give them a hug. And I know that my parents struggle with the fact that we, if my kids don't want to be kissed or hugged, like, sorry, it ain't happening. And they feel offended or take it personally. And part of that is social and generational. But I also know that like the messaging you send to your kids when they're 4, 5, 6, 7 about who you have to touch and let touch you, which is nobody, like, unless it's a doctor and we are there,
Correct.
is so important. And it there is like a line between then their attitudes as preteens and teens and setting them up to be, God forbid, in a tough situation where they could be taken advantage of. So like, what is your philosophy about this? What are some, I know you're not into hacks, but like, what are practical tips that like parents can and should do, when their kids are really little? And then essentially like the sex talk, which again is like been lampooned in popular culture for generations, but like is incredibly important. How do we approach that as parents?
So I think the first is just recognize what stage your child is in developmentally in terms of what they're able to receive. I think we get so anxious as parents that we want to we want to address this, that sometimes we are in a place that's way different than what our child is interested or able to even receive. So I think from a parent standpoint, knowing what it is your child is interested in or wants to know or is able, like, you don't sit your 5-year-old down and like give them the whole speech about you, and being open to the teachable moments when they come up, but using language and imagery and an approach that is able to be processed by the age child that you're talking to. So, at 4, 5, 6, 7, that could be something as simple as you don't have to hug anybody that you don't want to. And then that can lead to, they ask a question, you simply answer it. It can be, but that sends a very strong message that, hey, I have control over this space and over who, and then when you get into the 8, 9, 10, 11, they certainly can process a much more nuanced version of that around their peers and around interacting with kids out in the world, as far as physicality, and that there are boundaries and you get to make the boundary for you. And books are great aids for this because they provide an imagery, and there are age appropriate books, that then spark questions. I think it's really much more powerful when you're something that sparks, sort of like the Passover Seder, right? Like when you're a child, there's something that sparks a question that then allows you to answer and then generate more questions, because then you're feeding their curiosity. But the bigger picture is being sensitive to the age and stage that they're in, trying to deliver information in a digestible way that they're able to receive based on their age, even though we may feel anxious about it in the moment and want to just give them everything and go overboard. That often doesn't land or have any meaningful resonance, because your child may be not in a place to hear it because they didn't ask, or they're not mature enough or not developmentally ready to understand what you're trying to tell them. So, but being open to the conversation, being able to understand when the teachable moments arrive.
And a follow-up on that, thank you for all that. It's super helpful. Sleepovers.
Yeah.
I know that, and I've seen a lot of stuff online too. Everyone kind of worries that, their kid could be sexually assaulted by, this kind of boogeyman, but really,
or given a Xanax smoothie by someone's dad.
yeah, yeah. Or and I know that this happens, like
Yes.
this is where, the world, it ain't, as Ali likes to say, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, to quote a Philadelphia icon. But I think, I know the stats also bear out that oftentimes, these situations can be peer to peer, or an older child, but so I'm curious, like, your thoughts on sleepovers in general, whether kids should be allowed to have them, at what age, maybe certain circumstances. Is it like, do you have to know the parents, or, like, what's your policy on sleepovers and your recommendation to parents?
I mean, it's definitely evolved. Back, I'd say when my youngest kids were kids, no one thought much about it. Just, yeah, sure. Like it just wasn't a topic that people spent time on. And now obviously it's very, very in front of parents' minds. And I think part of it is that we have access now to so much news and information that it puts us in a place of anxiety, sometimes bigger than the actual issue can be. I encourage people to do what they feel comfortable and what they feel serves their values and how they want to function. I don't think I don't have a blanket policy around sleepovers, yes or no. I think common sense, you should have intimate knowledge and a history with the people whose home your child is going to. Their child should be able to have access to call you with any questions at any time. And I think I've heard a lot of people talk about this concept of not a sleepover, but a late stay, where you go and they watch a movie and they do all the fun stuff. And when it's time to go to bed, your child comes home. Sort of all the benefits of the sleepover without the sleeping over, right? But I also put this in the category that we tend to catastrophize and overthink risk because of our relationship with, we know everything all the time now that's happening everywhere, and it makes things seem so much more dangerous than they are. Jonathan Haidt's point about giving kids more freedom, autonomy, and less parent supervision time, because it truly helps emotional development, especially when it comes to play with their peers. The overriding reasons why parents give is that there are cars in traffic or fear of kidnapping. The actual danger to your kid of a stranger snatching them is so remote and so less than it was even 30 years ago. The online world is so much more dangerous to your child with so much more exposure to actual predators. But we have this really warped view of what's dangerous anymore because we hear about every one-off weird thing that enters our feed. And so we apply that to risk assessment. So I think being aware of that. I don't think that there's any right or wrong way, just like sleep training or just like so many other things that you have to have an approach that works in your world with your values and with your kids' lives. But over assessment of risk can sometimes hurt you.
You know, I got to tell you, you have a sixth sense with intuition and know who you're talking to, because this is the kind of stuff Neil needs to hear. Because if there was a guy who was the old paranoid parent, at the risk of sounding anti-Semitic, he is the paranoid Jew. He's like, I don't know, this could happen. Step
Yeah,
on a crack.
it could happen. You don't know, right? So I get it.
You don't know. You could be the example. And then what? Then you'll be sorry.
You know,
My
anxiety exists as an evolutionary tool.
It was
Okay,
there to keep us
people who are
safe. It
anxious
was there to keep us
survive.
safe. Yeah.
All right, Ali.
I hear that. However, in the world we're living in, most of the things that trigger our anxiety are not existential threats, but they just feel that way.
What's it go? Boom! He is on a. Wow, that's like a 3 in a row. That's a 3 in a row. You just hit a 3 from the mid-court line. Okay, so we are running out of time. We are going to have to do a part 2. There's no doubt about it. But I did want to bring this up. You know, you do have, quite frankly, epic social media presence, and you share a lot. And something that you did share was definitely something that, you know, certainly must have been traumatic going through. You had an injury. If you wanted to get into what happened there, and obviously you can segue from the fact that, and these were in the notes, Neil called you the Jewish Jordan. So you're a hoops guy. I was trying to drop some basketball references in there, but if you could talk about maybe perhaps a little bit of that, and then obviously what happened to you physically and how you've rebounded.
Sure. I was a Division I college athlete. I always sort of have defined myself that way from a physical and strength standpoint, and it was just kind of always the version of myself that I put out there. And you know, I'm 6'7", like all pediatricians, right? 6'7", 240, like you're a pediatrician for sure.
6'7", like the kids say.
I know. I hesitate. Listen, we're all shrinking. So, I mean, let's put it this way. I was definitely 6'7" at my wedding. I mean, I'm definitely not.
I feel like because of the memes, you got to just be 6'6" now.
I know. But that was, how about that? That was my peak height. Here's the thing about getting old and as you shrink, boys. Guess when you shrink, you know what doesn't change? Your arms don't get shorter. So they just reach further down the side of your pants. But yeah, I was 6'7", 6'6", 6'7", 240. And that was and I'm really into fitness and sports and all through, even after college. And then, so what happened with my foot is that it started with being born with I had really a significant deformity that my parents just never addressed. I had the worst version of flat feet, like pathologically fat feet. So all of the force in my foot was not distributed in a normal way because I completely lacked any of that. And I picked the highest impact activity starting at a very young age that I was obsessive about for almost 30 consecutive years without a break. I played overseas after college. I played in the Maccabi. So somewhere in my 40s, the consequence of that is I started having significant breakdown and arthritic changes in pain and dysfunction. And of course, that was very threatening to who I viewed myself as and wanted to fix it. And I started having surgery about 7 or 8 years ago with hardware, and then that hardware failed or got infected and had to come out, and then further crippled me more, and then further threatened kind of like how I view myself and started to affect me emotionally. And then I think for the last 4 years, I was just in chronic daily pain and still trying to show up because I'm responsible for supporting an entire household and a practice, and been trying to fight through that and not wanting to admit or acknowledge that something was kind of getting the best of me that I couldn't just overcome. And hold on, I have to plug in here because I'm losing power.
Keeping us on the edge of our seat.
Sorry. And then, finally 18 months ago, I really kind of hit rock bottom, and I emotionally, physically, and started getting help. When I started getting help, you guys know, asking for help is not something I was raised with. I was raised with putting your head down and being quiet and just trying to just be the provider and be the alpha and be everyone's, what you have to be for everybody. But it was not working. And then when I started getting help, I really was able to come to the understanding that I'm not the version of myself that I need to be. And part of it is that I'm in pain every single day, and there's no longer any way to address it. So I finally, took the hard step of making that appointment, speaking to the specialist, and getting being told what I knew was the answer was that if you want to go back to being the version of yourself you're supposed to be, this is what you have to do. You have to get this amputated. There isn't any other input here. One of the hardest things I ever did was make that appointment, to put that on the calendar, because, look, it would have been so much easier to step on a landmine or to crash a motorcycle or something like that. And then, but I had to actually make the decision to go in and tell them to cut it off. And that happened June 30th. And there was this transformation that started immediately that is hard to explain, but I rapidly returned to the version of myself emotionally and physically that I needed to be. And that's kind of when my social media took off. Like, all these things kind of entered my life as blessings because I took the decision to get healthy, and it turned everything around. So that's the story behind it. And it's, I'm still working with it every day. It's a really cool piece of technology that I'm still figuring out how to integrate into my life. But I get better every month, that goes by. I feel like I get better with it.
That is so fascinating. Before we did this, I was telling Neil, well, we never got into the details, but I had a friend from college who, the classic story, was in a car accident, ironically hit by a drunk driver, and he had to have his leg amputated. And he found a way through it. He was an athlete, but, not to the level that he would become. He went and won a medal in the Paralympics, if I'm pointing that correctly. And it became a signature part of his life. But to your point, what you said was, unlike stepping on a landmine, to the fact that you had to come to a conclusion, the gears are already turning your head being as a physician, but you walked through, you walked through the tunnel. I just feel like it's worth talking about. Now you have a life where you're no longer in pain. What is it like now? Can you play a little basketball?
I'm not really a basketball player anymore, but I really got into rowing in middle age. There's something about rowing that, I don't know what it was. I did do a little bit of training with the rowing team to rehab some injuries in college. But there's something for me that's like very zen about rowing, and I just love it. And so my goal is to get back into rowing. And, I have an erg, and I was, getting back in the boat. And so I'm training every day. I work out every day. I ruck now with weights. I couldn't imagine going for a 2-mile walk with weights strapped to me 2 years ago. The pain would have been, I couldn't even approach that concept because of it. And now
how heavy is your pack?
I do 45.
No snap. I'm thinking about it. Just to add a little
extra. Rucking is big time. Jocko Willink loves rucking. And so I do that. I literally don't have any limits. I can just decide to do something and do it because I'm not just suffering through this. And I'm working back to get back onto the erg and back into the boat by next summer if possible. And more importantly, like up here, I'm a new person.
What if you were one cool dude, man? Yeah. I did not. This is just tripping me out left and right.
I know.
Should we do the lightning round, Neil?
We're gonna do the lightning round.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Dude, I love it. I love it.
Here we go.
All right, here we go. We're just going to get right into it. Parenting advice in 5 words or less.
To be the best parent for your kids, you got to be the best version of yourself.
Damn it, I love this. Choose a superpower, super strength or super speed.
I'm going to go with speed. Speed kills.
One book every dad should read.
I think that if you are a parent of boys, you should read The Wonder of Boys and Of Boys and Men. If you're a parent of girls, do not have yet. I've not come across an equally as impactful book the way that those are. So I'm going to have to say when it's part 2, I'll have one.
Yeah, I love it. Something to touch base on the sequel. Yeah. Greatest TV dad of all time.
Dad from Michael J. Fox's dad on Family Ties.
Oh, yeah.
He was my favorite TV dad. Wanted him to be my dad.
Michael Gross. I think his name was Michael Gross.
Michael Gross. Very good.
Yeah, that was the actor. A dream dinner guest, dead or alive.
This is going to be very niche, but Maimonides.
Wait, what?
Moses Maimonides, or the Rambam, was a medieval age Jewish sage, but also a doctor, and also like one of the most greatest Jewish, thinkers of the time, not just in the Jewish world, but in the entire world that was known or civilized. He was the physician for like the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's court during that. He was just one of these people that we only know about him, but he's the most fascinating. I think about him all the time. There's the Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take, but there's Maimonides' prayer for physicians that I have on my desk. So I would like to. He would be my choice for that.
You had me when you said his side hustle was being the Pharaoh's doctor.
The side hustle was like, the court physician in Egypt.
Everyone else says someone from the dumb 20th century. Jesus, way to take it back. Go to post-workout snack.
I do the Greek yogurt and walnuts.
I'm with you there. It's almost like dessert, isn't it? It's like dessert.
Yeah. Put a little scoop of strawberry preserves in there, and I'm just like...
Yeah, I like the yogurt. Favorite movie to watch with the family? I mean, what a broad subject considering your kids are
I'm
30.
I'm gonna do a very non-lightning round thing and say that I've been trying to get my children to appreciate 80s comedy, and it has gone very poorly. Like, I so desperately want them to like Ferris Bueller's Day Off the way I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
John Hughes. I was thinking something that doesn't age well.
I want them to love the John Hughes canon the way that I do. It was so affecting for me, I guess, at the time of my life, being in high school when all those came out, and it has fallen flat. But right now, our number one family movie has to be Tangled. We all love that one.
I'm gonna revisit that one. Usually, I find there are movies that my wife and I'll be like, "This is no longer appropriate. This humor is now considered offensive."
Well, with my sons, it's The Sandlot. They'll watch Sandlot with me. We have a lot of nostalgia around that.
Oh yeah, I think Neil's about to go leave and cry right now. That really hits his era.
The Sandlot.
Oh yeah, 90s, anything from like 92 and beyond. He's like, oh my god, that was the best. Oh my god. So my son, and granted, I'll say this for the video games, he is freaking out on basketball and YouTube. One thing about tech is how they can dive into sports. It's insane. It's insane.
All right, well, Ollie, if your son is into YouTube, there's one clip on YouTube from my whole college career that was saved from a VHS. You can go to YouTube and look up Jewish Jordan jams, and there's a grainy 17-second clip of me throwing down a monster dunk against the mighty Harvard Crimson at the Palestra in Philadelphia, but it's the only surviving proof that I actually played college basketball.
So you played at Penn, yeah? Got it. My wife's family's from Philly. I bet my dad knows who you are. Or my dad, my father-in-law.
No, your dad likely has no idea who I am.
You'd be surprised at my father-in-law and his love for sports. He dressed up as he volunteered as a security guard to go watch a Villanova playoff game. So
that's big. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So we might be good. So
he's
Jewish
a Big
Jordan...
Five fanatic, and even if you're a Big Five fanatic, you would be hard pressed to remember me. But still,
okay. Well, you know what? He's in his 80s. He might be fired up to find something in here. Okay, so back to this greatest basketball player of all time.
Michael Jordan, end of story.
Damn, there it is. I
am Team Jordan.
That was a true lightning round answer. Morning ritual you never skip.
The workout. I train from 5 to 7 a.m. every day.
Shut up. 2-hour workout?
90 minutes, 2 hours, depending.
Let's hear what's in this. I'm very curious.
So I have a lifting day, and then the strength day will then end with some kind of like high intensity thing, like on the Echo bike and kettlebells.
Okay.
And then I have like the long cardio days where I'm doing like a Peloton. I'm still not back on the rower because I have to get a special attachment for my bionic foot. So I'm still Peloton and Echo bike. That's most compatible with my prosthetic.
How long's your Peloton session?
I do between 30 and 45, and then I do like a functional strength piece after that, which is like farmer's carries and kettlebell static holds and core and things like that. So that ends up being more like 90 minutes plus.
So you're still using weights to some degree, even on your
I
car.
lift weights. Yeah, I mean, I do use weights in some form almost every day.
Yeah. Damn, Jesus, I love all this stuff. I love it. Favorite thing to do after, well, this was probably the old days, but after the old days of the long ER shift.
I like to Netflix for an hour and hang out with the dogs.
Do you still do ER stuff, or are you just strictly private practice?
I still do like neonatal hospitalist
Whoa.
shift, so work, and then I'll still do occasional ER shift, yeah, but not as much. It's more for just because I like it, not because I have to do it anymore, which is kind of a nice thing to not have to do it, but still.
It's a freaking super doctor here. What album is at the top of your workout playlist?
Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run.
There you go. And finally, the last question of the lightning round. What's the best part about being a dad?
Wow. Personal growth, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, look, I respect and honor everyone's decisions. And they tell me, look, I don't want to have kids and never wanted kids. I get it. But there is no greater way to be the version of yourself you're supposed to be except by taking on the stewardship of another soul. And that you can't replace that with anything. You can't be the version of a human being that you are supposed to be without having that be part of your life, period. That's the hill I'm going to die on.
And that is why we do the World's Greatest Dad podcast. It really is.
Let's bring it home.
Dr. Michael Milobsky, you are the world's greatest dad, and easily in
I
the
have a
top
coffee
five
cup that says it. I have a #1 dad, so yeah.
And you're a top 5 doctor in my book. Seriously, we'll get you a mug.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for all the wisdom, and let's do this again.
I would love to. I would absolutely be honored. It was such a joy hanging out with you guys, and I'd love to do it in person too one of these days.
How's the deli scene in Denver?
Grim.
Yeah,
it's grim.
Yeah,
there's one kosher place, so we always just go to that. It's the Eastside Kosher Deli, and we now have kind of a shawarma joint that's kosher, and we have a kosher pizza place, but that is it.
Yeah,
so
that's just like okay, we have kosher. Yeah.
We've been eating out.